How often do you think about glaciers? They're really quite fascinating things. These colossal rivers of hard ice that slide down from snowy mountaintops and frozen highlands with a grinding, unstoppable force that's so powerful mountains are pushed aside or crushed entirely, and the rock underneath the ice is ground down to a fine, silty residue. As a matter of fact, this silty residue can create surprisingly fertile soils after the glacier has passed and the land has recovered. Owing to its raw size, the glacial ice is capable of cooling the ground and chilling the air around it, and the meltwater streams can soften the earth ahead. Glacial meltwater is a critical ecological resource for a huge portion of the world's flora and fauna, including humans. Now, over the years, the size of the glacier grows and recedes back and forth. The warmer summer months will see the glacier melt and shrink, its movement slowed, its course receding. But during the colder months of autumn and winter, rain and snow can add mass to the glacier. Snow accumulation in mountain highlands creates new ice mass, and it perpetuates the downward pressure that's compressing the ice and pushing the whole frozen river downhill. Over the course of hundreds and thousands of years, glaciers can grow in size, with younger outer layers hiding deeper, more ancient layers. And every year, as this melt-grow cycle continues, aerosolized microbes, swept up from the local landscape by wind or rain, are plastered against the glacier, where they end up freezing into the ice. Some microbes can end up embedded in the glaciers, buried under eons of subsequent ice buildup. And across all of these layers of ice, there's a veritable timetable of organisms, literally frozen in time. Alright, so that's a neat little rundown on glaciers, and it serves as a nice opening for today's science news. Today's news is about a research team from Ohio State University, led by Ziping Zhang, Matthew Sullivan, and Lonnie Thompson. This research team has recently taken 2 ice core samples from the Glacier ice cap in the Tibetan Plateau at an altitude of some 22,000 feet. Lead author Ziping Zhang said, quote, "These glaciers were formed gradually, and along with dust and gases, many viruses were also deposited in that ice," unquote. He remarked that these glaciers are understudied, and they wish to change that by studying past environments using these viruses and bacteria as evolutionary biomarkers, frozen into the layers of the glacier. The research team had to develop some new dating and analysis methods for these ice cores, and they found that the oldest ice was approximately 14,400 years old. When they performed various sequencing analyses on the ice to detect the genes and assemble the genomes and identify any species of microbe that happened to be on the ice, they made some very fascinating discoveries. The research team identified the genomes of 33 different viruses, and when they compared these genomes to those of known viruses kept in databanks, they found that only 4 of these detected viruses were already known to science. They were various types of bacteriophage, which are viruses that infect bacteria. And of course, they also identified a fair number of bacteria in these ice cores. There was also one virus genome that they couldn't clarify if it was previously known or not. It was a bit degraded and they couldn't quite match it up to virus genomes in a databank, but it wasn't so different that they could comfortably say that it was a new species. The remaining 28 viruses were new discoveries. Based on their genomes and similarities to other known viruses, the researchers believe that many of these new viruses originate from soil habitats or from plants that presumably were viable hosts or symbionts with the viruses. It's unlikely, the researchers say, that these ice core viruses originated from animal or human hosts. Matthew Sullivan, co-author of the study and microbiology professor at Ohio State, said, quote, "These are viruses that would have thrived in extreme environments. These viruses have signatures of genes that help them infect cells in cold environments. Just surreal genetic signatures for how a virus is able to survive in extreme conditions." These are not easy signatures to pull out, and the method that Ziping developed to decontaminate the cores and to study microbes and viruses in ice could help us search for these genetic sequences in other extreme icy environments. Mars, for example, the Moon, or closer to home in Earth's Atacama Desert." Unquote. Alright, so there's a ton of really cool information here. So not only did they find all of these wild, ancient plant and soil viruses, they actually had to develop a new way to decontaminate their samples and extract sufficient biomass to do this analysis in the first place. And these new methods have potentially broad applicability in other fields, like studying ice and rocks in other remote locations, or even on other planets. This is some pretty cool stuff. Anyway, to get back to it, senior research scientist at the Bird Center, Lonnie Thompson, was senior author of the paper, and he made a very fascinating point about climate change. Dr. Thompson said, quote, "We know very little about viruses and microbes in these extreme environments and what is actually there. The documentation and understanding of that is extremely important. How do bacteria and viruses respond to climate change? What happens when we go from an ice age to a warm period like we're in now?" And these are really fascinating questions because as the ice melts, these viruses are going to thaw and potentially reanimate. After all, they're not really alive, so they're not really dead either, and being frozen for thousands of years may not be enough to permanently destroy them. So will these thawed-out ancient viruses pose a threat to human society? Maybe. Probably not. I mean, even if we ignore the geographic remoteness of many of these glaciers, as well as permafrost and other thawing geological features that are suspected of housing ancient microbes, we should take comfort in the fact that viruses are usually pretty host-specific. And the ones that are uncovered here in the Gallia Glacier ice cores, they all appear to be interested in parasitizing bacteria, or living on plants, or in the soil. However, this isn't to say that there's no threat at all. Thawing glaciers may reveal the preserved corpse of an infected bird, or permafrost may reveal the preserved corpse of an infected caribou. These are much more concerning, as any reanimated viruses, or even bacteria or something, that has shown the ability to infect animals like this, like birds or caribou, they may have the potential to adapt and utilize humans as hosts. This may seem really unlikely, but after 2020, after the coronavirus pandemic, I really don't think that we should underestimate the danger of viruses. The researchers are right when they say that these understudied glaciers need to be studied more, as well as the types of viruses and microbes that are being released back into the world after thousands of years of being trapped in ice.